Cultural anthropology is a theoretical framing that you could use again to build on. You have to start somewhere, and anthropology is a methodology. As a matter of fact, most organizations now are drawing from anthropology because of this methodological framing. Now, what that means is that it allows us to go into a community and invite ourselves to understand the community through the invitation and acceptance.
Because it have never been easy. Freedom have never been easy. Because if freedom is given to you, then that is not freedom. So both the oppressor and the oppressed must come to terms with that. That if you want to be free, you are going to be like the chick that is inside the egg. There is no way that chick can live until there is a break of literally breaking out the egg shell. Then you come out, now you can live. If you remain in the comfort of breaking out the shell, you will literally die.
If you look at everything that's happening, you feel helpless, and then you feel hopeless, and that's when we start getting into these defunct parts of our thoughts process. And I'm not negating anything on mental health. Don't get me into that space. What I'm saying is a lot of times that when we feel hopeless, if we look to achieve something, to participate with others, like minds, doing what we are attempting to do, it does help your thoughts, your heart, and your mind. Hello, everyone. My name is Loretta Green-Williams. I am founder and chief executive director for Women of Concerned Professionals and Strategic Conscious Networking, WCPSCN. We started here in the States, but we are international. We have 11 chapters all over the country, all over the world, and we're excited to be with you today.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that so much, Loretta. Now, let's spend a few minutes talking about you, like I just told you before we started to roll. We spent some time about your background because we are essentially having a storytelling, which is about us, where we are coming from. And we do that because we help people to also know not only us, but also them, because we transfer that to them. By the time you start making mention of some places, your experiences just now, the people don't necessarily look at you, they look at themselves. It's a reflection on. All right, so tell me, you are a little girl growing up now. What do you see around you?
I'm a little girl growing up actually in the country. I grew up in South New Jersey, southern part of New Jersey. And what was interesting about that, and it's interesting we're having this conversation, I grew up in a community where it was 98% Black. I grew up where I saw entrepreneurs, I saw change agents. I grew up in an era where there was great changes. I grew up during the civil rights and the Black Power movement here in the States. And so I saw empowerment to multiple levels. And one of those ways of those empowering lines of understanding was through storytelling. Our lineage is Jamaican. And so we still have family in Jamaica, and storytelling was very critical in my thought-provoking direction. My family always told stories, and I too tell stories. So growing up, I saw a lot of conflict, but yet a lot of love, a lot of dismemberment in thought, but yet a lot of construction in thought. So there was this contradiction, but it developed who I am today.
All right, I want you to talk more about that contradiction, that conflict, and that dismemberment, and that love. Yeah, that is very interesting. And if you were to plot that into storytelling, it would be very interesting because it means there are a lot of dynamics to keep people moving So share more about that.
Growing up, I always heard stories about the moon man and how this moon man was so powerful. And I thought, that's what I heard, that this gentleman that my father and his brother would tell us the stories of was a man who walked on the moon. I couldn't figure that out. He was a maroon. My grandfather was a maroon that was taken from Jamaica and brought here to South Carolina and enslaved. And that stayed with me, that power that he was able to bring culture and traditions with him through his family that is still instilled in our family today. And that contradiction came into the space of a dad that fought hard to be a man, a gentle man, but had to fight. He was the first to be in the Union in South Jersey. And he told stories of how he would dig ditches and the white men would expel their urinations in the ditches and he would have to cover it. They'd make him do that for 8 hours at a time. And he said, my wife wants, but my baby gotta have. And that was the contradictions that my life was filled with. The power and the empowerment of the constant direction of knowing where you're going, yet the battle that had to be fought to get there.
All right. So, what sense did you make out of that experience of that gentleman you call him and fighting also at the same time? What sense do you make out of that?
That there's power in peace, there's power in determination, there's power in strategic planning, because that's what my dad was doing, strategic planning. That's what we call it now, but that's what he was doing in the 50s and the 60s, developing and structuring and designing and creating and building relationships and building my direction, having a vision for me. And I'm grateful to God that I'm able to enhance and move that direction forward.
Now, of course, the term that are going to dominate our conversation just now are cultural anthropology, community advocacy. These are the things that define you today. Tell me, at what point did you get involved in this highly important concept and, of course, the way of life of people? At what time did you become more active in this area?
My entire life. There was never a time where we as a family was not working to help support the community. And it's really interesting because I'm able to analyze what we did through anthropology and sociological findings, which we did, which was natural in the community. Example, because I am writing my memoirs right now. And one of the things that I'm reflecting on is how my dad used to get us up on Saturday mornings and we would go to the farms and pick up food and to the bakeries and get day-old breads, and we would deliver it to community members that were less advantaged than we were. And so that was social development that helped to design what I frame now as cultural anthropology in reference to community sustainability. That sustainability is important when structuring thought. It's critical when developing direction. And so it was enabled in me from the time I was a kid. So I know nothing else but work for community. And now I'm given a global platform to do the same work. And I'm excited. I'm excited that I can do it.
That's so good. That's so good. You know, there is nothing bigger than that internal fulfillment. That fulfillment that you feel inside doing what you're doing. I say quite often here that the thing that we do are not only for ourselves, they are also for other people. Because that is the best way to serve. If you are serving yourself, that is going to be selfishness, no? But we need to serve the community. And it's not by accident that today we are also talking about the theme, the idea of community, looking
Yes.
at the African diaspora. That is important. That is important because if all we can do is only ourselves, we're going to be very limited. But if we can serve other now we can go to places. All right, before we move in more into cultural anthropology, you did make mention of the Black Power movement. I want to believe you say that you were pretty young at the time. What do you see around yourself around that topic?
Well, in the Black Power movement, I was in my teens, but I was very active in reference to um, my community and trying to restructure the shift of power. And in the Black Power movement, what I identified is that the youth that engaged and helped to substantiate that movement, we were really tired after 7 to 10 years seeing what was happening to people of African diaspora here in the United States. And we decided that we were going to create a framing around it with a methodology. And in that methodology, what occurred was a movement that splintered into actual rebellion, actual intellectualism, actual culturalism. So these different splinters engaged into a framing that allowed us not only to identify ourselves to our African lineage, but it also helped to engage in a discussion that allowed us to understand what should be the next steps for the next generations.
All right, now we're still in that period, that Black Power movement. What is the collective consciousness of the people? And how was that shaping the movement?
The collective thought was freedom, and it still is today. It's really interesting to me how new language is covering up old ways. That's number one. But the bottom line is freedom. And even in America, what I always found problematic is how we live in a space that we identified as segregation. It was not a segregation, it was an apartheid. That's what it was. And what is happening in our country even today is the structuralization of that re-apartidation, trying to bring us back into that frame. And so, in that re engagement of thought during that time, what that did, it allowed us to accept and receive who we are based on who we were. That was very important. We were Africans at one time. It allowed us to embrace and utilize that to reframe who we were and who we are today.
Thank you for saying that. That is very important. Um, it is very important. I'm not going to go deeper there. Now, could you maybe point out maybe some incident or people in your time during the Black Power movement that might have shaped your reality, that might have inspired you, that might have happened, whether at a national scale or within your neighborhood, within your city, within your town? Point out something for us to reflect on.
There was a gentleman, as a matter of fact, Eugene Kelly. He was very profound in what he did during the time. This is still in South Jersey. We were in high school at the time, Violin Senior High School. And so this was 1970. And we wanted certain respects. I'm not going to say demands, respects. And Eugene Kelly was brave enough to step up and take leadership. And I always admired him for that. We also had something we called the paper book. You could not go anywhere without reading. And you had your book, and we would carry a book, and some would do it because they thought it was socially engaging. Others did it because they were really engaged in conversation. But Eugene will call you out in your book, and you better know that book. And it just amazed me how much he read. He read so many books. And when you had a book and you say, I'm reading, and he goes, well, what does page 72 say? How do you relate to page 72? And I'm going, how does he know all this? He was an avid reader. And that impacted me. And the fact that we had so many people in our community that came to the area during the second Great Migration in the United States. And what that was is from before World War II up until 1970, we had millions of African Americans moved from the South to the North. They either went to the North or to the West coast of the United States. And their impact on us was the fact that there was limited opportunities for education there, and they're strong to desire to obtain education here. The other thing that impacted me the most about knowledge production, because that is where I see it was knowledge production, was my godmother. She remembers her mother leaving the plantation after the Civil War. She remembers stories told and how she recalls her mother did everything she could do to help her get books and for her to learn to read. And if anything I can say that impacted me during that era was knowledge and knowledge production.
Knowledge. And when we are talking of knowledge now, and when we are talking of the African diaspora, we will never forget a man like Marcus Garvey,
Absolutely.
and his preach about the knowledge about ourselves.
1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Here we go.
That's it. The philosophy.
And,
yeah.
Well, my father was a Garveyite. And so, yeah, my father was a Garveyite. And so the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, even when Black Lives Matters took place, I had a young lady contact me, and she goes, "Mom, what should we be doing? What kind of music we need?" Okay, I said, well, this is interesting. I told her to read this. And I gave her a list of other books to read. And I said, you need a context setting. The context setting will help you develop a methodological framing. In the methodological framing, you will have your strategic plan. You got to read Marcus Garvey.
Thank you so much for that. And of course, those that are listening to us now, they should understand that those books are still available today. Just for you to find out, you're going to have to ask.
Yes.
You're going to seek.
Yes.
In that the knowledge that is going to make you who you are is not going to jump on you. You're going to look for it. But the knowledge is there.
Yes.
But it's not going to look for you. You are the one that will look for it. If you are looking for liberation, note that you are going to find it. You are going to fight for it.
Yes.
That is important. All right. Yes. Tell me about those movements now and again. Don't worry, we are moving toward anthropology just now. Were there a time that maybe other people of the African diaspora, maybe those in the UK or Canada or other part of Europe, could have been helping or contributing or supporting any way of the fight within the United States? Share anything with me about that you know of.
Well, it's really interesting you say that, because the Black Panther Party, what they actually did is Fidel Castro invited us, because I was a part of the Panther Party as well, to Cuba to study revolutionary acts. And those were really important times. When Jamaica got its independence, I remember how excited my dad was and elated. And one of the things he said is, now we have to keep our freedom. And so what that engaged in me was the fire to understand that not only does there have to be that methodological framing from an intellectual space, but the body space as well. You have to be present physically as well. And I think that is one of the things that is paramount even in this discourse.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Now, you did make mention of creating knowledge material, no? When there was this storytelling, of course, the woman talking about how she had seen her mother coming out of the plantation and the rest of that. All those are important. This is why we are talking about storytelling today. Telling people how to tell story, telling people the importance of telling story. Letting people understand that we are not new to this. As a culture, as a people, it has remained an integral part of how we function. So we must understand the importance of storytelling. All right. Now, talking of creating knowledge material or educative material, if you want, were there a pattern, were there certain elements that needed to be observed that you know of at that time, looking at maybe storytelling, looking at the African diaspora or the Africans American, if you want? Share anything with me in that area, because it is vital even for today, 2024.
Absolutely. I cannot stress enough the impact of the writings of Angela Davis. Here is a true revolutionary, and she still is in her own right. And her bravery of writing and telling the stories that she encountered is extremely, extremely powerful. There's a woman called the name of Michelle Wallace. Not too many people know about her. Powerful writer. And it's really interesting that we talked about those contradictory spaces, because her bravery to write what she wrote caused her to be blackballed from the literary field. It's really interesting. And so the other aspect of that piece is that we have to look what is happening to America today, that you have the most prolific Black authors being banned, their books being banned. It's really sad that young people in schools today cannot read Maya Angelou or Angela Davis or many other prolific Black authors. We're in a difficult time here when it comes to education. And while it may not appear to be, it is very critical. That's one of the reasons why my organization, WOCPSEN, we have an education part of our pillars. We call them our 4 pillars. One of them is education. And through that education, we have something called Women of African Diaspora Griots. And we don't take the word griot lightly. We do understand what that means, and that is a very sacred word. But we do that because there's sacredness in the voice. And we of African diaspora here in America, we are going through some major shifts that the dominant is trying to embed upon us. And so what we say at WOCPSEN and in our program of reading and books, that you ban them, we'll read them.
Because it have never been easy. Freedom have never been easy. Because if freedom is given to you, then that is not freedom. So both the oppressor and the oppressed must come to terms with that. That if you want to be free, you are going to be like the chick that is inside the egg. There is no way that chick can live until there is a break of literally breaking out the egg shell. Mm-hmm. Then you come out, now you can live. If you remain in the comfort of breaking out the shell, you will literally die. Because that is the rule of life. If you want to live, you need to break. If you want to die, then don't do anything. Nature will gradually lead you to that, because you become part of the experiment. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, looking at those days and looking at today, what kind of differences do you see, if there is any, in terms of the movement, the mission, the desire to be free as a people?
The movement has changed because I'm noticing there's more independence in direction. And I think because of that multiplicity of the direction, that we're losing a primary direction. But yet there's still movement. The mission will never change, which is freedom. Like you said, it's freedom. And either it's physical movement, freedom, liberation from oppression, liberation from doxologies that are not favorable for life. There's still that opportunity to move forward from that. If they were to have goals to create a new framing, I would say, like we've already said, and I tell young people this all the time, there's nothing new under the sun. The dominant will always want to be dominant. They're creating new frames of creating and sustaining that dominance. You have to go back to the old landmark. You got to go back to the Du Bois and to the Garveys and read those books. Yes, those books are 100 years old, but the mission is still the same: freedom.
Thank you for that, Loretta. The mission is still the same, and it's freedom. And for the sake of the argument, many people in the diaspora, the hundreds of millions of Africans in the diaspora, need to understand that we are not free, which means that the mission should not end yet because we still remain what we are. Just a little change. It that you are not hung on the tree anymore, at least legally. Of course, they can still hang you illegally.
Yes.
Um, there is no chain anymore on your neck and on your legs and on your hands. But remember that the chain has been transferred to your head.
Yes.
Which means now that even when we look at the entire continent of Africa, you begin to question yourself. What do we mean by freedom? Are we really free here? Are we really talking of independent people here? Or are we talking of something other than independence in the real sense of the word?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, to be really blunt and clear, we as Africans and people of African descent are still not free. So,
Hmm.
the march should not stop.
Hmm.
All right, having said that, let's move to cultural anthropology because that is going to be important for us in the diaspora. Uh, in that we need to understand something beyond some of the surface argument. So
Yeah.
tell me, when we say cultural anthropology, what does that even mean?
So, cultural anthropology, which is interesting, this social science was actually developed to embed stereotypes upon Africans and its diaspora. That's its origin. It started with craniology, where they decided that the African's skull was smaller than European skulls. Therefore, our brains were smaller. We would have less intellectual capacity. And so that was justification for the enslavement movement. And so while cultural anthropology derived from that, there's something called post-colonial anthropology. And that's really the framing that I draw from. And that's where we look at taking what the dominant has written and said about us and rewrite it ourselves. Start looking at our lives through our own lens. So post-colonialism, it addresses the situations of cultural conditions of the former colonizer. So we're taking a look at what they did and reframing it and showing them what they did through their language by embedding our language on top of it. And I think that this is something that really needs to be addressed because that's what's happening now. The dominant is taking their language and they're molding it to make it frame itself the way it was 200-300 years ago when cultural anthropology began. Through a lens of post-colonial anthropology, we're saying that we're taking it back, peeling the layers, and making you see what really has occurred. And I think that this is really critical because when we look at the aspects of the knowledge production, this is what is critical about cultural anthropology. The knowledge of the production of knowledge, the knowledge of production of knowledge. Who has given you your knowledge? Why have you got it? And what does it do to you internally? When I look at anthropology, I look at it as a framing that I can utilize to say the words, oh, really? So every time I read something, I say, oh, really? That allows me to pull back what is being said and look at its skeleton. And so cultural anthropology from the lens of post-colonialism allows that, oh, really, to take place on a continuum, on a daily basis, that when you read something, you challenge it with, oh, really? Because there's more is being said than is being written. And that's an opportunity for you to address your realm.
Thank you so much for that. I like two things that you said there. I would like you to retouch some of them quite briefly. The first one is that we can take what they have written and use it, but this time we're going to reinterpret it through our senses and sensibility. This is very important because this is what humanity have always done. you look around in the West, particularly, you will see structures like the obelisk, for example, in Washington, in Vatican, in Paris. But these are not actually European structure. These are African structure.
Yeah.
They believe it's going to be useful for them, so they take it. Now, when we talk about science, technology, mathematics, astronomy, these are things that were the foundation were already set in Africa. But of course, it has grown so big today uh, to the point that we should not look at it as something that belongs only to a certain people. It belongs to all of us. If that is a valuable thing in Rome, you can say, well, you're not going to need it because it is created by the Roma. No, let's take it and see how we can reinterpret it to also serve us. So I don't know if you want to say something more about that, that we can actually do this again, but through our senses and sensibility.
Absolutely. So what is really interesting is when Audrey said you can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, I had a professor, Dr. Agada Chatterjee, and she just has always been in my mind when I consider conversations. She said, but you can take the tools to reconstruct your house. So in the space of that dismantling, and that's where that sense and sensibility comes from. How do you dismantle what has been within you from a colonized space and reaffirm it as the true self that you are? And in that, we can't destroy who we've been, but we have to analyze who we've been and how it has presented to us in order that we can take it to the next step. And I think that is one of the most critical things that individually we must consider, and then how we are to do that collectively. Now, in my case, what I've done is through my organization, WOCPSCN, we're able to look at the core value of gender equity and equality. And the reason why I'm bringing this as an example is because when you look at the whole world and the mess we're in, it can be overwhelming and can shut you down. I say, take a backyard and consider what you want to address in that backyard. Within that space of deconstructing the master's house, using the master's tools, you're negotiating how those tools will be used. And the use of those tools, hey, you realize that, well, that tool and that tool, I can put those tools together and create a new tool. That's what we have to start doing. How do we create new voice? How do we create new direction? How?
That is a beautiful question. Of course, I'm not answering it because I am going to leave it there so that other people that are listening to us, they can also attempt to answer it for themselves. But I think in doing this, we are going to need a kind of a skill set to be able to reinterpret the information we have in front of us. That information in front of you is not finite. It can again turn into raw material for you so that you can reinterpret it, but reinterpreting it now according to how it fits you, according to how it fits your worldview, because you are a different kind of people. Of course, you are a human being like every other human being, yes, but you have had experiences, your ancestors, your people, your history. How do all this reflect in the narrative that you are creating? This is up to you to do. And this is what I think make it even beautiful at the end of the day. Otherwise, life is going to be too monotonous. Now, what kind of skill set do we need to do this? What are we supposed to be doing in actually doing this in practical terms?
Reading. You have to go, in order to understand the methodological framing, you got to identify where it originated. Okay. So again, this is not a master's tool. This is our tool. This is a diaspora tool. You need to find out a theoretical framing. You have to go, okay, this is my thought process. How do I develop my thought process? You develop it by reading, understanding literature that is framing your concept. Your concept has to be framed through something. I call it the bagats. Okay, I call it the bagats. If it were not for Marcus Garvey, how would we in Jamaica have gotten to Rasta? Because it came out of Garvey's theoretical framing. That was a part of it. So you have to go to an orientation, the original orientation, and build from there. So what is happening is I cannot build a house unless I have solid ground. You have to have a solid foundation. And that solid foundation has to be on a theoretical framing. You have to read. The best thing to do is go back to that 100-year-old literature. The 20th century, we had some of the most prolific writers. The 19th century, the 18th century, while they weren't allowed to read or write, some of the diaspora got the word out. Read. Be inspired.
Be inspired. And of course, there are a lot of things that can actually inspire us as people of African diaspora. You see, we are hundreds of millions of people. This has become almost a slogan now here in Obehi Podcast. But it is true. We are actually hundreds of millions of people.
Yes.
But we live in a particular situation in that most of us are living in the West. You are talking of the Brazil, talking of those in Argentina, talking of those in Cuba, talking of those in the United States, in UK, in Canada. All of us put together, we are a significant force in the world.
Yes.
Okay, to these people, to these hundreds of millions of people, how do you see the importance of cultural anthropology? What can it do for us? How should we use it?
Cultural anthropology is a theoretical framing that you could use, again, to build on. You have to start somewhere, and anthropology is a methodology. As a matter of fact, most organizations now are drawing from anthropology because of this methodological framing. Now, what that means is that it allows us to go into a community and invite ourselves to understand the community through the invitation and acceptance. Right now, I'm writing, I got a grant from the New Jersey Historical Commission, and I'm doing research on African American communities in Southern New Jersey. And one of the things I'm sharing is that I've observed how people will come into a community with preconceived notions of what the community needs. And in anthropology, particularly post-colonial anthropology, we use traditional considerations. With that is we go into the community, we ask the elders, may we have permission to obtain your wisdom and the knowledge from the community. Once we have their permission, we go and we enter. And the reason why you need the blessings of the elders, one of the things I'm noticing with new communities, newer generations, the limitations that they provide for elders and the importance of wisdom seeking through eldership. Now, I speak to this because, as you know, this week I just celebrated my 70th birthday. And as a person of 70 decades of wisdom, I think it's really important that understanding is given to the history and the learning. So in anthropology, it is history. It is sociology. It is philosophy. It is religion, religiosities. It's all of that combined. And I think that that's what anthropology can provide for an individual who wants to begin that freedom-seeking search.
And of course, for younger people, maybe in the diaspora, they might ask, but what are they going to benefit from that? Well, there are a lot of benefit for you because those material you are going to extract from, maybe doing your research, talking to people like Loretta, or other people in the community is that you're going to have content that you can describe as educational content, knowledge-based content. You can make money from that. In fact, there are a lot of people making millions and billions of dollars out of this knowledge in the African diaspora, but they are not people of African diaspora. Somebody is still standing in the middle doing the story for us. What if we could leverage that story for ourselves?
Mhm.
You see, you talk of going to interview elderly people. This is something particularly important for us. You see, it is said among Africans that what an elderly person sees sitting down, a child on top of the tree cannot see it. You see, a child on top of the tree cannot see it because that child hasn't lived. You need to live to be able to tell the story of your experience because you first need to have the experience.
Yes.
Now, how do we leverage that power?
We have to go back to the old landmark. Going back to the old landmark of sitting under the lens of the wisdom people, the elders, the knowledge production people that already exist. How you harness it is write it, tell those stories. There might be opportunities, especially with new tech the way it is now, is that you can actually share those stories. I think the biggest thing that is being asked is how do you monetize it? I think what you need to consider when writing is, do you want to monetize it or do you want to provide a legacy? That's what you need to ask yourself. Providing a legacy is obtaining that information for the communities to come, that these stories will be lasting for centuries to come. What do you want to do? Storytelling is critical. And it's important because what is happening, I'm noticing particularly in the US, is they're trying to deny us our truth, limit us from telling our stories. It's one of the reasons why they're banning books. Somebody told a story. It's either their life story or they told a story, fictional story, but there's some truth to the fiction. So you have to decide how you want to address your legacy. Do you want to just make money and put it out there? Or do you want to leave a lasting legacy? In my case, I tell my daughter, when I transition, you're not going to get millions, but you'll have a legacy that globally people know your mother and people know that your mother loved them. And that's even more important because I don't know what generation in my lineage that is going to come through. And someone will say, oh, I remember your grandmother. I remember your great grandmother. I heard of her. That's my goal. So you got to decide what your goal is, what your GOAL goal and your GOLD is.
That is very powerful. You see, in A classes, which is our project, we do have a project within that project, which we call Life and Legacy. Now, that Life and Legacy project, of course, in that we have done a series of interviews, particularly of people who have shaped our community, our life. People like Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, and a whole list of other presidents in Africa. We're trying to say, what can we learn from these people who have shaped our life? We're not necessarily the one say whether you are a good person or bad person. We're just trying to extrapolate the story, your experiences, what people say about you, and we propose it back to them. It is up to the people to judge, but people are conditioning the way we behave, are shaping our society. We are doing this within the African diaspora, interviewing people, experts, to talk about this individual. And we're also doing it within our culture in Africa. Either, for example, there is a man in my small town in Oromi. I come from Oromi in southern Nigeria, whom, because he was wealthy, he brought water to our village. because as of that time there was no running water. People were using very dirty water, and he was living in Benin. So he came to Uromi and he did an industrial borehole, and he said everybody can come and fetch for free. He brought telephone line and he distributed to some key player in the community. Through his influence, a tide road passed our village. Now, the other day I would say, but we need to know the name of this person and we need to remember what he have done. And by doing this, I interview some people who know him, and we are writing a book also of that because we made this book documentary. Now we want to make a book also about that. Why? Because it is important. I have seen him. I have seen what he have done. I have benefited from it. Now, in that story, I said, I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing this for us, for all of us. I think this is important. The
Yeah.
legacy. What are people going to remember after this time?
Hmm.
Now, I have a question for you, another question.
Yes.
Um, Everybody learned from somebody or from something or from somewhere. The way that the older world was built, you need to usually learn from the masters. In fact, there's another series that we are doing. We call Learning from the Masters because you don't know everything, no? So I'm asking you personally, have you learned from other anthropologies or have you studied other anthropologies that help to shape your worldview about cultural anthropologies in the African diaspora? Who are your
Oh,
masters?
my masters, my masters. That is a good question. Who would I consider? That is a good question. Um, that's a good question. My masters would be the future masters because I've not learned or I've not studied all that I want to. I studied the great writings of Du Bois, who was very critical in my theoretical thinking. W.E. Du Bois, I think, really helped to shape me with the anthropology because when I was working on my doctorate training, they did not add Du Bois as a theorist. And I brought him in anthropology as a theorist, even though he did social work identity from a sociological perspective. I felt that he was very anthropological because of the community he addressed and how he addressed it. But I think the individual that to inspire me the most in anthropology is yet to come. And I'm optimistic about young people and their studying and their writings. So if I would add who inspires me, the young person that is writing today, that is who is inspiring me.
Thank you so much for that. Now, some people sometimes argue about anthropology and cultural anthropology. I don't know
Mhm.
if there is even a difference between the two. What can you share with us, your opinion on that?
Okay. So when you look at anthropology, like I was stating before, the biggest challenge with anthropology, it's its origin. Okay. When we look at the origin of anthropology, we do understand that that was designed for the purpose of structuring the biological framing of who we are, and that anthropology was structured on Darwinism. And we know that Darwinism is the reason why we have the, the transatlantic slave trade, that the fittest, the strongest of the fittest, they identified that Africans were not strong enough, therefore it was justifiable for them to be enslaved. So that's what we're looking at from that perspective, the history of anthropology. That's where its origin comes from. Remember, Darwin wrote in 1859, The Origin of Species, and that's where that whole concept came from. And so that's how we can say the history of anthropology started. But when you're looking at cultural anthropology, it's looking at specific aspects of culture. Now, what became problematic about the cultural side of anthropology is that theory, that concept allowed people that identify themselves as anthropologists to go into particularly African and African diaspora communities and research. And when they did research, they came with these preconceived notions. And within these preconceived notions is what they have identified is what they've written about us today. And because of those preconceived notions, that's why a lot of African diaspora people are not aware of what really occurred culturally with our diasporas, because we were not informed. And that is the biggest problem. And so if I had to identify those two, that's the separation. The origin is anthropology. Cultural anthropology is when they came into our communities and decided, oh, this is the behavior, this is their politics, this is their music, this is their religion. They informed us of what they saw us as through preconceived notions. Post-colonial anthropology is taking what they said based on Darwinism and saying, no, 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 no. This is who we are. This is our culture. This is our music. This is our religiosity. And there's complexities into it. The original concept of cultural anthropology made people of color around the world very, very, very childlike and extremely simplistic. And there's multiplicity and there's complexities in our lives. And so if I were to design a framing, that would be it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, that is really very important now. It look like what I often say, see the reality through lenses, no? It means that the lenses through which many African and African studies, so-called African study, are not even based on how the Africans see themselves, which will actually be very offensive to a people. Mm-hmm. In that you want to know me, but you don't care what I say about myself. Mm-hmm. You want to know me based on what you believe I am, which is already, like you said, a preconcept, a kind of a precondition that you have set up by yourself.
Yes.
Like those guys who sat in Berlin and they decided that they are going to split up Africa according to how they want it for their own benefit. Mm-hmm. And for the African people, we are obliged to respect that, whether we like it or not. If we don't like it, we are rebel, we are terrorists, we are criminal. If we like it, we are good, we are what Italian would call bravo. Mm-hmm. You're a good boy, you know?
Yes.
But the question now is that, what do we want to be? Do you want to be a good boy or a rebel?
Yes.
Because be a rebel now, meaning that you are conscious of what you want and you are standing by it. But there is a price to pay for that too.
Yes.
So it put us at a condition, because this is how many Europeans still see Africans today, that they think they understand who you are based on the record that they have. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they never need to ask you any question. Mm-hmm. Now, what should we do as people of African diaspora? Again, I'm evoking that hundreds of millions of people. Can we do something about this?
Absolutely. Call them out. Call them out. Call them out. I have something I do. When someone says something and I say, oh, really? Can you? And I repeat back what they said. Sometimes, and you have to remember, they've had 500 years of doing this. So they don't even realize it's happening. It's unconscious. You have to bring it to their consciousness. So if someone says something that's offensive or that is problematic, bring it to their attention. Really, I heard you say, repeat it. Is that what you said? And let them reaffirm it or re-identify it. Sometimes you gotta hear what you say in order to regurgitate what needs to be said.
That is very deep. So that somehow it appeared now, because that is a term that I wasn't really very comfortable with. I didn't speak about it quite often. It's about racism. And the idea that I've always had in mind is that I don't think it is my duty to teach the European about racism. I don't think it is my duty to help them understand that they are supposed to know, because they are supposed to know. You take a knife, you don't put it on your throat, you put it on another person's throat. So you tell the person, oh, tell me it's hurting you. But you don't do that. It's like the policeman in the US sitting on top of, nearly on top of George Floyd. Many people were called to testify. There was this one police expert, I remember, but I don't remember his name. He said, well, he was saying I couldn't breathe, but he could breathe, because if you could say you couldn't breathe, meaning that you could breathe. But what does that even justify? That I have the right to sit on him. He said he couldn't breathe, but if you could talk, meaning he could breathe. What does that explain?
He could breathe because I allowed you life. See, you have to remember this, particularly here in America. The dominant believes that we are still in a subjective space. They still believe that we of the I call it the ancestors of the 4 million. In 1865, when they let go, they didn't free, they let go the 4 million from the plantations. Now, there are many stories that aren't even given about how many probably couldn't even leave the plantation because their ownership would not allow. But we're going to identify this for this context setting. So, in that space of ownership, this body ownership, the dominant here in the United States still believes they own this body. This body is the embody of the ancestral enslaved. That person, great grandfather or great grandfather, is in the lineage of the enslaver. He has been indoctrinated and trained decades that we are to be enslaved. Psychologically, that framing is still there. So, with the knee on the neck, I have power over you. At least you can get air as long as I say so. And when I decide you no longer need air, I will make that determination. We here are in a stronger colonized position than other African diasporas, my personal belief, because it is being in a space of modernity that we do not understand. You see, here in the United States, we never identified ourselves as being colonized, but yet the framing was the same as colonization. What is also problematic is we have to live with our colonizer daily. We cannot get free. Well, yes, you can. No, you can't. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had something like the Tulsa riot, the Tulsa massacre, where they destroy entire communities. It is still being done, but it's not being done in this strategic way of ultimate violence, but it's still violating communities of the diaspora that just want to live alone and in peace. Can't do it. So the dominant still sees the right to destroy this body. And what we have to do is, no, we don't have to teach them, but we have to bring to their awareness that we are human beings. You don't have the right to tell me how I or where I can breathe. So I need to call you out every opportunity. Oh, really? So you think because I'm this age, I don't have the intellectual capacity to check you? Oh, really? Share with me why you think I don't. And then put it back on them. Not correcting them, you're calling them out. You're calling them up. You're putting the burden back on them. But to hear it and walk away from it allows them to continue the conversation. Call them out. I get rubbed. Child, you started me now.
Yeah, we are in for this. This is what we're supposed to do, no? Thank you so much for that. All right, now let's change the argument. Now let's talk about community advocacy. It's not really changing the argument; it's just taking it to a different dimension.
Right.
Because now we know that we have challenges, and we also know that until we face these challenges, it will not fix itself. I remember, for example, this episode actually started just now. You talking about the Black Power movement and all that you learned in those times. And now you are today involved in community advocacy. So tell the listener what is important in this? Why are you doing this? What is the importance of community advocacy for African diaspora?
It'll never change until we're free. So the way I look at it now is I'm doing it more strategically. I'm approaching it from the aspect of looking at specific goals and objectives. And within those specific goals and objectives, I develop a strategy and a strategy plan. And so it's always the same: freedom. If one is not free, none of us are free.
And are there maybe some way that you will recommend for people? Because now all of us are not the same. We all have our different potential and sometimes also our different sensitivity. Are there some way you see to be more effective to engage in community advocacy that you can recommend for people?
Absolutely. Find what I call it your not. When you get up in the morning and you gotta do this project. You gotta do whatever you're doing. It's like the middle of the night just wakes me up with thought. That's your not. That's the passion. That's the innate thing in you that you're required to do as the human being on this planet. And so again, don't look at the whole world because it will become extremely problematic in doing work. Observe the world and where you can do your work. Find out what your strong parts of your life, of your thoughts are, and work towards it. Strategize and move in that direction. And so there are tons of organizations. If you can't consider where you want to go, maybe you're still searching, you're still seeking. That's okay. Listen, I didn't start my organization until 10 years ago. Well, 15 years ago. It took me that long. Now, was I working in the field in the meantime? Yeah. But I didn't find my stride, what worked for me. So to find what works for you, don't worry about, I can't find it, because there's work out there to be done. You just have to find your not. What is it, the one thing or two things that you want to do for the rest of your life? And that's the thing. What is that you want to engage? Because the bottom line, it's all about freedom. So if you're looking at the climate crisis, free from that. Gender inequities, freedom from that. Food insecurities, free from that. No matter what it is, if it's from a political perspective, freedom from that. So look at it from that perspective. Find that not, that passion that I got to do this. If it's everything in my being, and go do it. Because if you and the next person and the next person, if we all just take a segment of time and just create change in that little space, look how much change will take place.
The change is what we want. The change is what we want. All right, now tell me about networking, working together, because that is this something that I see among African diaspora often. The idea that me, and myself are the project. But what we see about the challenges about this is that we can't go that much far. But if we want to go far, we need other people that believe in what we are doing too. So we need to organize. Again, you see, I will go back to Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey didn't just say, oh, I'm intelligent. Of course, he was intelligent, man. He was very intelligent and astute. He was very intelligent both in the area of organization, in business, and many other. But he brought people together. I think that
Mm-hmm.
is where the biggest power was at the time. So I wanted to speak to the effort of organizing ourselves, not me. I cannot do it alone. But how can we liaise with other people so that we can make effort, real impact?
You your networking has to be considered through the framing of how much you want to time you want to put into your whatever networking you want to do. And framing that, for example, and it's really interesting you said that because that's the name of my organization, Women of Concerned Professionals and Strategic Conscious what? Networking. And the networking capacity, it has to be conscious networking. Um, we don't come together for social purposes, while there are times where social networking is very, very important, not denying that. But we come together for the networking purposes of putting tools and people together with those tools to help change and shift community development. And so the networking side is critical. But again, if you're not sure where to start somewhere. You want to start, look at my organization, WOCPSEN. I'm one of those people with our organization is I don't look just to do our work, but to support others in their work as well, which is very critical. But yeah, start somewhere. But networking is critical. Looking at it from an overall perspective could be challenging. So instead of looking from an overall perspective, again, what can I do in my backyard?
That's so good. That's so good because everybody has a backyard.
Yes.
Everybody have a community. The
Mhm.
problem is not happening only in the United States or only in the UK or only in Canada. It's happening all across.
Yes.
I live in Italy. The problem is happening here too.
Hmm.
I can do something here where I am. You see, in 2004, when I came to Italy, I was looking around for information about the people of Africans in this part of the world. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
find what I was looking for because I just wanted to know what is their story? What can I learn from them? And I was doing that, being conscious of the fact that I am going to be like them. So I
Hmm.
better know about it now. I didn't find what I was looking for. So I went on a research, talking to people who have been here for more than 30 years before I came in.
Mm-hmm.
I would just turn on the camera, tell me about your story.
Hmm.
Why are you
Hmm.
here?
Hmm.
And I managed to gather a lot of information, moving across different cities in northern Italy. And from
Hmm.
there, I realized a documentary and I published two books.
Mm.
And this book now, I'm not saying they are bestseller. That is not the reason. The reason is
Mm.
that so that other people like me who will come tomorrow, they will ask the same question like I did, but now they will have something where to start from. They will take
Right.
it up, read it, and say, okay, you mentioned so and so person. Let me go and find out if I can still reach that source. That is what I was looking for. That is what other people will need. So everybody have a backyard.
Yeah.
Anybody can do something.
Yes. Absolutely. Everyone can do something. And I think that's just really critical that people absorb that consideration because if you look at everything that's happening, you feel helpless and then you feel hopeless. And that's when we start getting into these defunct parts of our thoughts process. And I'm not negating anything on mental health. Don't get me into that space. What I'm saying is a lot of times that when we feel hopeless, if we look to achieve something, to participate with others like minds doing what we are attempting to do, it does help your thoughts, your heart, and your mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, tell me more. What do your organization do within the area of community advocacy? I want you to share more so that other people that are listening, they might connect with you. Yeah, please.
Absolutely. WOCPSEN, excuse me. Actually, we started on LinkedIn. We started on LinkedIn in 2009 as a group, and a few of my friends, we decided that we were going to do some community work as well. And in that community work, we've elevated 11 initiatives Our most important initiative is Walking in Silence for the Silence, Domestic Violence Solidarity Walk that takes place the first Saturday of November every year annually. So we're really excited about that. This year will be our 11th year. What is critical about the work that we do is that we address gender equity and equality through our 4 pillars, which are health, education, global sustainability, and community development. And through that, we help communities develop framing for freedom. Free from. Freedom is free from hunger, free from lack of economics, free from limited education, free from.
That's so great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. All right, now tell me, how can people reach you? Those who want to work with you or learn more about what you do.
Absolutely. Of course, on LinkedIn, because I'm always on LinkedIn. That's how we met. And I thank you so much for you having your platform on your podcast on LinkedIn. It's very informative. I enjoy them. But they also can reach me on our website, wcpscn.com. You can reach out to me at wcpscn.com at gmail.com. You can find us on WhatsApp, and you can find us on all social media.
All right. That is clear. Now, today, Loretta, we talked about the importance of anthropology, community and advocacy in African diaspora. And we really touched some important points throughout the conversation. Now, what would be your final take here? Maybe something you wanted to say that I didn't ask you, or something you don't feel that it is important to share to conclude the conversation. Please go ahead and do that.
You were an extremely wonderful moderator. I loved it. I love the conversation we're having. I had the opportunity to share my birthday this week, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And one of the things I want to close with is what I shared with my board of trustees, which are my second family. My board of trustees are wonderful people that work extremely hard for no money, but they're committed. And so I want to read this in my closing. I shared with them, thank you for all your kind expressions. At this point in life, one's major component is reflection. The new language is being my authentic self. Now, I grew up during a time when we said word bond, which is similar. Both means that you must find who you are to maintain your meaning. Now, I'm a believer in God and his word through Christ. My daily goals are not to be a Christian, but to behave like Christ did, with kindness, love, and patience. Since I am given life, my role is to share patience. Now, I guess I'm on this planet to share with all of you my authentic self through this organization. I want you all to take with you the kind words of love that you've embraced on me to assure that when you turn the young age of 70, they will speak it upon you. If each of us show love, kindness, and patience, we can change the world, one community at a time. This is my theme song that motivates me to maintain my authentic self. And the song is If I Can Help Somebody as I Live Along This Way by Mahalia Jackson. Then my living will not be in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is really deep and powerful. I appreciate that. I really do. And in fact, I don't need to add anything to that. Thank you so much, dear Loretta.
Thank you.